Dr. Nancy Crupi. I'm a biologist with 15 years of academic research experience internationally, and I've been working on a lot of different things. And ultimately, I have also had to overcome a lot of personal challenges. I'm here to guide you towards awakening and ego death. Ego death and trauma healing are the most important tasks we need to accomplish today for humanity. The second season of the New Earth podcast is going to be specifically focused on giving you stories so that you see the trails and what kind of breadcrumbs you need to follow for you to reach your own ego death, for you to reach your own trauma healing, and for you to embody your highest self finally. Let's start. Hello, everyone, to a new episode of the New Earth podcast. Today we have with us Uri. She also goes by Moon Priestess. She's a clinical hypnotherapist, a breathwork facilitator, and a ceremonialist. And she is incredible. She's an incredible example of really the journey that all healers kind of have to go through, and starting from a completely different start point, oftentimes from corporate life or from like really jobs that are often misaligned with us, and then going through our own struggle and finally finding our light, finding our true self and realigning and really blooming into the beautiful flower that we are. So hi Yuri.
Yes, hi. Nice to have me here. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure to host you. I'm really, really excited to tell people your story and all the things you went through and you overcame successfully. And the fact that you're a clinical hypnotherapist and a moon priestess on their own, these two things, I feel like they're very, very interesting. And I would like for you to just, yeah, introduce yourself. Tell us what you do today, what kind of practitioner you are. How is your life?
Yes, yes. So I am a moon priestess, Yuri. I literally facilitate full moon, new moon ceremonies, solstice, and equinox ceremonies with the star alignment. I was initiated from Sedona to become a moon priestess. And before that, I would call myself hypnotherapist and counselor, therapist. I wasn't quite sure who I was. And then when I was asking, who am I? And that's when the Sedona sort of initiated, well, you did all that because you are Moon Priestess. Moon Priestess is not someone who works in an office or call herself as some sort of a therapist. You learn all different techniques and skills and experience because you are the priestess who are going to help people overcoming all these different types of situation by accessing the subconscious mind, accessing the Akashic records. And in order for us to access that, it needs a little bit more of a skill set than just channeling. So I studied probably 10, minimum of 10 different healing modalities throughout my life ever since I started my healer's journey 18 years ago. So I knew that I was intuitive, but I wasn't quite confident enough what I should do. I was in my mid 30s when I was um, engaged with God presence and start speaking to spirit. But I still wasn't quite sure who I was and what I was supposed to do. So for 18 years of my life, I studied, experiment, real lifetime experiment, going through my own traumas, challenges, and all the lessons that was being presented. So throughout last more over 5, 6 years, I was more focused on regressing people in a private practice, facilitating private and group retreats, facilitating breathwork ceremonies, plant ceremonies, and all that. Um, I I sort of tune into what people need where they are at, what types of healing modalities are the most beneficial, and I work with them um, just a really individual basis.
Yeah, that, I mean, we all start from a completely different point sometimes, and obviously it's all necessary to the final person, to the final plant that we're supposed to become. I feel like we don't realize that we oftentimes, our ego and society make us go through all of these things that have a completely different meaning in our mundane world, but from the perspective of the inner engine that we are, like we all have an inner engine that depends on the kind of person we are supposed to become at the end, the adult tree that we are supposed to become. But we don't know that we are actually already actualizing who we are along the way because things take a completely different shape. The mundane world is made of so many interactions that we don't possibly realize. I feel like I went through something similar in that sense because I'm also a scientist, a
Mhm.
biologist, I have a PhD in biology. And all of those things were absolutely necessary for me to start understanding how the universe works, how everything works. And I published a book called The Fractal Universe, in which I put together all of these modalities. That would have not been possible if I
Mhm.
hadn't not. If I had not studied all of those things, I would have not been able to convey my messages to people like I do, because that allowed me to really understand how we function and then be able to connect the dots of how the world function, how society function, how the universe functions. And once you do all of that, then you actually can embody your final role in the world. Otherwise, you will not be able to understand what you're doing, right? So you're right, absolutely. I love what you said that you didn't know you were a moon priestess, but you have learned all of these modalities, all of these things, because ultimately that was your final destination in a sense, or at least the current destination. Like you never know what else is actually coming for us. And tell me more about how you started in the sense of, so are you from the United States?
No, I'm actually from Korea. That's where I
Okay.
was born. And I was sort of like from living there, I question everything. I'm the person who question everything. And I didn't necessarily like the traditional way of living. Like women will get married and children and become a housewife. Somehow that didn't necessarily resonate with me, and I wanted to experience somewhere a bigger and more than what I saw. So I moved to United States when I was 17
By
and
yourself?
by myself, and I went to
Wow.
college, and I lived in New York City, and I was sort of fairly skilled in art. So I went to art school. I went to Parsons School of Design and majored in fashion design because that's where I thought I could make some kind of money because I wanted to be independent. I didn't want to be dependent on husband to survive. So that's the path I chose, and then I moved to Los Angeles because I just knew with my body that living in New York City wasn't what I meant to do. It just wasn't a right fit. I needed a beach, I needed the ocean, I need somewhere a little bit more with the trees, and obviously Manhattan does not provide that. So I moved here and work in downtown Los Angeles as a fashion designer, consultant, clothing buyer for retail stores. And when I was hitting mid 30s, and same thing with my career. I start questioning about like why isn't this like I'm pretty good at what I do, but why am I not fulfilled with what I do? Like I was making a six-figure income in my early 30s, 18 years. That was a lot of money for one single woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I wasn't very happy. I wasn't very fulfilled. And I was much more interested in like what you do. Like I was interested in more science, doctors and skincare, the supplements. Those are more of my interest. And then the other challenge I had was my status as a single woman in my mid-30s. I had a tough time meeting, commit to myself for something more serious. So that kind of got me question about like what's wrong with me? Like what's wrong? I think I wasn't a bad looking woman. Uh, uh,
Absolutely.
and I wasn't like, I had a great job. I wasn't a bad looking woman. I wasn't obese. So I started asking God at the time, like, what's what's going on with my social life and my being single for so long that everybody's asking, when are you gonna get married? When are you gonna have kids? And I just didn't have an answer for that. So I went to the church. I sort of stopped going to the church when I became an adult, but I start going to the church and I start asking God, like, what's going on? What's with me? Give me some answer over here.
So just give me like an idea, but like were you dating? Were you doing anything? Or you were
Yeah,
simply, oh yeah, you were dating, but you were
I was
not.
dating. I was dating. I was like, it was kind of almost like I felt like I was in one of those bachelorette because, that's when I think that I joined actually one of the dating site that was kind of new. And then there were lines of guys who wanted to go out and date. So I felt like, oh, this is great.
But then nothing will actually come down to a
Nothing,
relationship. This is
nothing.
actually very common just for you to
Mhm.
feel lesser, like that was your problem. This is actually very common
Yeah.
for especially for women who are, as like you went away from a very conservative tradition, which is like Korea. And in Korea, there are a lot of like women, for example, who are divorced tend to be marginalized by society. Like I remember I had a roommate who was Korean and she got divorced and her parents never told anybody. Like her parents in Korea, she was in LA, but their parents in Korea never
Hmm.
told their friends that their
Yeah.
child, their daughter had actually divorced
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's like pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah, they would be shamed for that information. And
Yeah.
so did I, because I mean I'm divorced and my mom would never really share it to others. She would just say, oh, my daughter is living in US, but should never share anything like that. And I didn't want that to be a burden for my family. So when it happened, we were just kind of like quieting that, even that was 10 years ago or so. Um,
But let's go back because I didn't want to
yes,
start like to go
right.
go to spoil too much about your story. But like I feel like my point was really that coming from such high pressure kind of culture, even if
Right.
you went away from it because you felt, itchiness about
Yeah,
that culture, you didn't like it, you wanted to be independent, ultimately you still came to the United States, which is an extremely patriarchal place as well. And so
yeah,
unless you're the pretty Barbie doll, like
yeah,
if you're a strong woman with a strong personality like you are,
yeah,
and you have your own really like independence and you make
yeah,
six figures and you're young and you're
yeah,
powerful and you're
yeah,
promising and you're incredible, it's difficult. Most men will have imposter syndrome, with
yeah,
women like you. And so it's not easy. This is like everybody's story. Like
yeah, a
when you're a
lot of,
strong woman, when you're a
yeah,
priestess, who is a priestess? A priestess is a woman who is really very self-aware, very aware, very out there and capable. And, so all of these characteristics are not easy for you to find a partner because you need to find a
yeah,
partner who has
yeah,
his own higher consciousness, higher level of consciousness. And unfortunately, especially in the world in general, because the world is patriarchal, we have we as women have been put through a lot of things through history. And so now we have become incredible. And men have been put through zero pressure through history. And so now, like,
exactly.
a lot
Yeah.
of men are not really, they don't level up. And I know, like, this sounds like discriminatory and bad, but it's really the truth. Like a lot of
It
men,
is.
unfortunately, are not as skilled as a lot
Mhm.
of women, and so they have imposter syndrome now, and that's
Absolutely.
societal fault. That's societal fault because they
Yeah.
haven't put men under any pressure and they have put women under too much pressure. And obviously, our evolution, like if we're
Yeah.
still alive today, is because we have overcome a lot of things. And so
Yes.
if you don't overcome anything, necessarily you don't evolve, you know, like, so this is really like there is a huge gap. That's why dating today has become so difficult, because there is a
Abs-
huge gap, and it's
Yes.
due to patriarchy have
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
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 And
So let's continue that.
yes.
Continue with
So,
your story.
right. So it's right. So exactly. It's not like I wasn't getting myself out. It's not like I didn't have sources. It's just where I was. Even at the time, I wasn't a priestess, but I was representing independent women, right? And I was also representing that I am not going to settle for what was traditionally valued, right? So that was a big thing that I couldn't meet someone. At the same time, I also had something going on inside of me subconsciously that was holding me back to meet someone, which I didn't realize back then until later in my life.
What
But
was it?
it was my self-worth.
So you did not know your self-worth?
Well, the thing is, in my conscious mind, like I said, I'm a decent looking woman. I have a good job, good education. I can carry myself well. So what's, I'm a high value person if you're just looking at the outside, which is not meeting well with a lot of men because a lot of men they don't like my voice because I'm strong, opinionated,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I will speak up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So a lot of men, like you said, who are comfortable at where they are, they don't like to be with someone like me who has her own opinion. They like someone who's gonna say yes and
You're right.
right, right?
You're right. That's what they want for
Yeah.
women to say, of
So
course.
so those there is no match with a lot of them. And also then I also don't want to settle for someone who values that about me and then like the fact that I am uh strong and opinionated and also make money and all that. But then they are not bringing something to the table. Like, whether, they're all good with that, but they're not matching where I was um as a
I
partner.
understand what you mean. I understand because, like, unfortunately, it oftentimes, especially when the relationships and unconscious people can only establish unconscious relationships,
Mhm.
right? And so, especially when we are young, and I'm also divorced, especially when we're young, we tend to establish unconscious relationships, which
Right.
means that as much as you're like, I haven't even found myself yet, right? So, because you hadn't found yourself yet. And the men you were meeting were like, I think I want a doll, and instead this woman has a voice, right? And so
Yeah.
all of these mismatches are really due to unconsciousness, however, and so when there is unconsciousness, everything becomes an exchange, a
Yeah.
trade of things, right? And so what is a trade
Right.
of things? So either you find someone who is as good looking as you are, because these are also the egoic unconscious version of us can only be this superficial. And so
Hmm.
we always look at things like how good looking people are or how much money they have. And at the same time, someone is like, okay, I love this woman. She has money. She can be my sugar mama, right? But
Yeah.
that the opposite of that is a man who is like, yes, he says you're right all the time. He
Yeah.
says you're fine. He says you're perfect all the time. But it's because he's having a parasitic kind of relationship with you, right? And so,
Right.
unfortunately, whenever we establish relationships that are unconscious, we can only have these sort of settings. Either we are the parasite or the other person is the parasite, or we clash because it's our egos, right? And the ego is not capable of real love. And so until we meet someone who has our same level of consciousness, it's not possible to
It's not, yeah,
establish
sustain the
real
relationship.
relationships. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that led me, and then I sort of had a moment with God at the time. You know what? you know what? I'm just not gonna, why don't I just like detach myself with the concepts of needing to get married, needing to be with a partnership. If this is your, um, your guidance for me to, maybe there is a possibility, but if it is my path to not have a partner, I accept. So, in other words, I surrender myself as like, you know what, I'm just not gonna have that attachment to needing to be married, and I just move on with my life. So, when I made that decision, I got this spiritual awakening that happened where I was presented with spirits, God, whether you call it God, divine, um, sort of like what people usually would see or face from in plant medicine journey, like ayahuasca. I
Mhm.
didn't have anything, but at that evening, I had this engagement with the divine, the angels and demons and Jesus and all appeared, and they were fighting over my soul because the decision I made about letting go of that concept of needing to be with someone, is very ego driven consciousness that um opened up a path, opened up one of this pathway for me to be a little be more connected. And our dark side is kind of like, wait a second, we don't want that, her to be more going towards to light. So they're basically what they're doing is they're pulling me back as this pathway opened up for me to
Wow.
be more surrendered to this whatever the God you lead, I follow. And that was what ultimately that was my shadow was pulling me out of it. But I had that engagement. It was very interesting because I was sleeping in a room where it was air conditioned, and I got soaked wet, all my body, everything was moving and shaking. And this was like a plant medicine ceremony without plant medicine that was
Wow.
happening 18 years ago.
So you were sleeping, like
Yeah.
how was it? You were sleeping, and as you were sleeping, you had all of this journey.
Yes.
You saw the devil, basically the
Yeah.
demons, everything pulling you down, and your
Yeah.
soul trying to, go
Yeah.
up and
Yeah.
escape from this
Right.
gravitational attraction of your shadow. Basically, this
Yeah.
is beautiful. This is beautiful. And this is simply from surrendering. And I think this is something that I've also done recently, to surrender in a sense. And it's really like a completely different way of existing in a sense.
Mhm.
And I understand what you mean, that
Yeah.
like like your shadow. What we don't understand is that there's so many levels to this. Give me a sec. There's so many levels, because I feel like most people don't understand that what we're actually doing is we're sublimating our souls through our body. And I'll explain this. It's an alchemical thing that we're doing, right?
Mhm.
So we all start from a body that is very earthy, is very attached to the earth, and as much as that is also attached to our mundane reality. So there are different levels of reality, right? Like you can really live in the pain, in the suffering, in the drama, or you can go a little bit above that and understand that all this drama doesn't make any sense and be more conscious of yourself, but still be in the egoic reality. And then you can go a little more above it and understand the entire society doesn't make any sense. It's just a training for our souls, and a way for us to really go through trauma and go through all the things that we need to release for us to keep going up and to keep ascending to the
Right.
divine. And then there are
Correct.
more levels, right? There are more levels
Yeah.
that are not even, they have nothing to do with our bodies, because to reach the following levels you need to literally sublimate from the body and become a soul again. And
Mhm.
so there are all of these levels that we go through,
Yeah.
and the act of surrendering ultimately it allows this flow of our soul to keep ascending because it's us pulling it down. Like this is a natural phenomenon that happens naturally because it's how the universe works. It's like the gravitational and the centrifugal and centripetal force. Like the forces that pushes you towards the earth, the gravitational attraction
Yes.
of the earth, and the force that pushes you up, that pulls you up towards the moon and towards up. So we have these two forces constantly. And it's interesting that you're also a moon priestess, and the moon is part of this.
Yeah.
I host events called Moon Seeds in which I explain to people how the moon
Uh,
participates with its cycles, because the moon, we believe that the moon is always there, and instead the moon actually moves and it becomes closer and more distant from us. And
right.
when it's closer, it pulls us up more, which is during the new moon. And when it's farther, it doesn't pull us up as much. And so the earth pulls us down a little bit more. And so these cycles really impact our souls and our us in such a huge way that we don't realize. Even the stock market follows the lunar cycles. Everything follows the lunar cycles on our planet.
Yeah,
And so
right.
people just don't know, right? And
Correct.
so this is to say that the idea of surrendering, it's so
Yeah.
important, because once you surrender, you
Yeah.
finally allow the process to keep going and to just happen, because it's supposed to happen. The fact that we awaken and we start having these higher perspectives as we grow, and as we not just we grow, but also through generations and through incarnations, we go through this sublimation of our soul that gets higher and higher, higher, and our chakras get activated more, like the higher chakras get activated. If we remove this pull down that is from our shadow, from our ego, and we surrender, we're just allowed to move up and allowed
Right.
to go up. And so that's
Yeah.
exactly what was happening
Yeah.
to you that day.
Right. Right. So that's what was happening. And ever since then, I mean, I was able to commune with divine, like I'm having a conversation, which at the time I thought that that was what everyone was doing, but I was doing it a little bit more close. And now I understand that's my gift to be able to channel. But I was working as a fashion designer. I was fashionist in Los Angeles downtown. So I wasn't just quite sure, like, what am I supposed to do? A week later, exactly, I met my ex-husband
Wow.
and we got married.
Wow.
Right. So it's it's very interesting how things work. I married a man who was an extremely handsome, beautiful, physically. He was an ex-model and also very tuned into holistic lifestyle. He was hosting a lecture on how to be healthy, and he was utilizing some of the Amazonian herbs. And I went to one of his lecture and was just mesmerized with his knowledge and what was shown. I was never introduced to any kind of Amazonian herbs, and with that we started to work together, got married. We went down to Amazon. I got to see his involvement with the herbs. He is very much of an nature-driven man, and he did so many of an ayahuasca ceremonies. I was introduced to ayahuasca at the time as well, and throughout engagement with this man, the funny thing was that when I first started this journey, I asked God, like, okay, well, you want me to basically become a healer, and I don't know who to heal, so show me who needs the most healing. And that's when I met my husband, and he actually physically very healthy, but emotionally, he was very angry man who had an anger management issues. So with him, to try to save our marriage, we went around the world to find the cure to figure out what can actually um, help him to get out of this instant anger that just kind of temper that shows up without even any reasons.
Hmm.
So that led us for so both of us would attend any kind of expos or lectures. We went to understand the therapy deeper. We work with the spirituality, any kind of brain, new technologies, herbs, different types of healing modalities to help him get out of this zone of this red, very violent, um, very traumatic response that I was directly being impacted by,
Hmm.
that I question if I need to stay in this marriage or not, my entire marriage. If I didn't have a kids, I would have left him.
But you had kids with you. How many kids do you have?
I had two kids with him and to save our family. And again, to not divorce myself out of this marriage where it would be very traumatic for my entire family. And I would be labeled as as
A
a
divorce.
scarlet, you know?
This is again when the
Yeah.
conservative tradition, then
Yeah.
even if you're like, I don't accept this, I don't like it, how much they actually affect your decision making every day, because you've been questioning for how many years have you been married?
So I was married 11 years
So
and
for 11 years, you have
yeah,
questioned whether you should have
yeah,
left,
yes,
and you
exactly.
haven't for 11 years. And like, this is beautiful that you have tried to help him as well. This is incredibly beautiful. But
Mhm.
also, it's like you see how, these conservative traditions actually rub on us so much, even if we
Yeah.
don't realize, even if we don't accept them, even if we escape from them, even if we go away, still it's ingrained in us so much. And the idea of the shame the
Oh,
guilt
yeah.
towards your
Oh,
parents, that
yeah.
they still don't say that you're divorced, right? All of these things.
Yeah.
So culture plays such an enormous role in our capability of awakening and in our
Hmm.
capability of healing, because you will not make the next step unless that will be okay with your entire family, with your entire lineage, with your entire culture. And oftentimes that is a limiting factor, in fact.
Correct. Yeah. So, I mean, that's why I finally made a decision, but I made that decision because I just couldn't live like that anymore. My physically would show up in my body that, I was in pain. I was in, some sort of a serious situation with my physical body that I had to stop. And I went on, and that's when I was introduced to plant medicine more seriously for me to actually participate on. And it led me to understand deeper consciousness connection through working with the plant medicine.
That's beautiful. What kind of plant medicine did you work with?
So I was introduced to obviously psilocybin, ayahuasca, and MDMA and several other plant-based MDMA is not plant-based. MDMA like it's called sassafras and kanna. So those were the plants that was introduced, and interestingly, it was giving me the same message that I was given 18 years ago about who I supposed to be. The message was very clear, and I just never listened. I was still half my, body was still in fashion industry, and the other was becoming a healer. So 7 years ago, when I was introduced to plant medicine, same message. You need to stop what you're doing and go out and help heal, people as a healer. So I dove in a little bit deeper, and that's when I studied hypnotherapy and became a hypnotherapist and ceremonialist, breathwork, and so these were more of a recent practice, and it led me to work more deeply with the plants and herbs. And I thought that I was enlightened on that way. And I remarried my ex-husband
Hmm.
a year later. This is how incredible your self-sabotage, your patterns that you repeat. So I do know that you understand this. We reincarnate, we have past lives, and I'm actually a past life regression therapist. And throughout, I understood my past lives, and we repeat. Whenever we come back, we bring our karma, our wounds, and we repeat it in our current life. And this time, what was being shown was I was repeating my past life wounds that I need to heal within the same lifetime. Like a remarrying someone who I have a very karmic relationship with, that indicates I am repeating this pattern
I
with,
think in general, right now we
yeah,
are for how the universe is expanding. So
yeah,
I explain in my books how the universe expands in a fractalian ways. And so fractals, when they get towards the end side of their expansion, as our
mhm,
society is, right? Our society right now is at its peak of expansion because I don't
right,
think we're gonna grow more than that. We are going towards a depopulation, right? So we are
yeah,
already in the peak
mhm,
of the amount of people we have on this planet. We're already going down. So
yes,
during that peak, everything becomes exponential. And so if before we will be doing, I think I never thought of it, but it makes sense. It fits together.
mhm,
So I
yeah,
think if before we will make mistakes once per lifetime and then once
yes,
per lifetime, then once you get to the exponential phase, then you start having more concentrated experiences in just
mhm,
one lifetime. Time just happens faster in a sense. Things get accumulated.
exactly,
And so you're,
absolutely,
yes, and
right.
so, but that is the most useful part because that helps you, remembering past life is more challenging than remembering what
Mhm.
you did a year ago, right? And so it's easier to understand your patterns if inside within the same lifetime. And this had happened to me as well, in the sense that I also went through multiple toxic relationships.
Yes.
And and I did go back with a toxic boyfriend once, and then I
Mhm.
realized, and then I didn't do it anymore, but I kept having toxic relationships just with more covert narcissists, basically more covert and more covert, so that I will
Yeah,
not realize that they were, right? And so
right,
we keep going, we keep repeating the same pattern until we heal the very last bit of the shadow
correct,
and the
right.
trauma that we need to heal. And so doing this within the same lifetime, I think is very, very functional and useful to your journey. Like it's been useful. So what did come out of it?
Well, what came out of it is a very strong message that like are you going to do about your relationship with yourself? That's what came out the most. And to add on to what you were saying is that what I got channeled through was that at this moment where we are at as a consciousness evolution is that we are meeting every single past life karmic relationship to resolve because where we are at is we're like sort of done with the way we're living as an earthly being. So like we're basically resolving all of it right now. So that's why we have so many different relationships showing up in this lifetime to resolve and then move through. And I do believe that all our past life connections are here to be healed.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. And like
Yeah.
I feel like I wasn't a lot of people talk about also having a soul contract and not just karmic relationships in terms of potential husbands or potential actual people whoever you have a relationship with, but
Mhm.
there are a lot of people who we have some what is called a soul contract, which is someone who in the past life you have in a sense given to each other the task of telling to each other,
Mhm.
keeping each other on track, or telling each other things. And I didn't believe in those things. And then I
Mhm.
started actually experiencing, psychically, experiencing the feeling of having a soul contract with someone. And also, I start having people who will just come to me and tell me things that were kind of like out of line. And I was
Mhm.
like, this is so, and saying those things, multiple things, multiple times. And I'm like, this is something compulsive. It's almost as if this person is here to
Mhm.
give me that message that he doesn't even know why he's doing that, but he has to give me this message. And this has happened so many times to me, especially in the last year, a year and a half, that I really realize there is something that goes beyond us, that even if our body doesn't allow us to, because our body is also part of the structure that puts us down and that doesn't allow us to, it's like a cage for our souls in a sense. And so
Right.
it doesn't really allow us fully to experience the full spiritual self that we are. And so our body kind of keeps us stuck and doesn't allow, our brain doesn't allow us to remember what we did during past lives. But there is still this compulsion, this, we are a vessel for this soul that has a task to do, and it performs that task even if we are like, I don't know why I said that, I don't know why I keep saying this, like, but there is a reason that goes beyond
Yeah.
your
Right.
body, beyond
Right.
it. It doesn't come from your brain. It doesn't come from a memory that you have physiologically stored in your brain. It comes from another thing, another source. It comes from your soul. And that's really like, I had the experience a lot of times as well. So it's like, it's beautiful that you've been able to, do you feel like you've been able to heal this karmic bond you had?
Well, I mean, obviously, the first thing that you have to do is realize, right? And then the second thing is to actually move away from that to understand what that lesson is representing. And then third, then you have to heal that by understanding the root of it. So all of this was a part of my healing practice that I actually studied, and I was able to apply it to myself. It's it's not easy. It's not easy, but it's it's easy to leave the relationship, but it's actually very difficult to truly learn the lesson, because learning the lesson isn't just about leaving the relationship, because learn and also being able to open your heart for yourself to really truly embody the lesson that's given to you is another level of learning your soul's lesson. And that's not easy for sure, because it needs to be done through subconscious level, because otherwise you're just attracting similar energy in different body and different relationships
Yes.
dynamics. Even with girlfriends, I would explain, it's keep coming back at me of this, narcissistic type of relationship, even through the girlfriend situation. I'm like, oh, like, what does it want to teach me about it? And it's again, it's the self-worth that wants to teach me. And the what I'm just loving about what I do at the moment is that the plant medicine ceremonies, ayahuasca, mushroom, all that thing shows you so that you can understand this teaching wants to be revealed. But actually, practicing what I'm learning has to be done with your willingness and how to integrate, which is very important part of this journey. And that is not something the plant will do it for you,
Yeah.
right? You still have to really work on shifting it when it's being presented. And for last year and a half or so, I started to work with this new mushroom that became a part of my life. I do really have to say thank you to this elements that was helping me through. It's just really strengthening my journey as a healing practitioner, and also for my clients to really get the results that they're looking for. So that's where I'm at. I'm actually publishing the book as we're speaking with this. So that's kind of where I'm at. I do all the things that I've been doing as I was healing through, putting into practice.
But what's this mushroom that you're now using?
So it is called the Amanita Muscaria, and it's the red mushroom with white dots. That it's called shaman's mushroom. It's called the king of the mushroom land. We are not very familiar with it because it's labeled as a toxic or poisonous. But there are a lot more studies coming out, a lot more of experiment coming out of utilizing this mushroom for microdosing, and I was able to put my hands on it about a year and a half ago, and it really dove in deeper, and it's changed my life. So I'm working with that. I have a line of the mushroom tincture lines that I created with this mushroom, and also have a book that's actually coming up called
Ooh, look at you.
Healing with Amanita Muscaria. So um,
I love it. I love the cover. It's perfect
yeah,
with the
yeah,
moon and like harvest. It's so perfect. Did you
yeah.
make it?
Yeah, so I designed it, and this is literally my life. I'm a moon priestess, and this is where I go. Whenever I do plant ceremonies, this is where I go. I go into the deep forest, and this is how I sort of download the messages from divine. And it's the moon, I mean, the moon is just amazing. Because it's just like shining through your subconscious when you're actually willing to work on yourself and reveal it. And the mushrooms are just there to kind of like guide it through. Pauses the time where subconsciously our patterns are designed to move from A to B to C, right? Right? That's why it's hard to get out of a toxic relationship or addictions. Uh, what the mushroom helped me was to from A to B to see these patterns, giving the pause in between for me to get back on my track with what I decided to embody.
So you feel like it gave you more. So let me understand. So basically, you're
Mhm.
saying that usually our subconscious changes our patterns in ways that we don't usually are conscious about, but that with Amanita Muscaria, you have been able to kind of remember those choices.
Right.
Those choices have been made conscious to you. And so now you can keep track of those choices and actually make them consciously instead of
Yeah.
subconsciously.
So the pattern, correct. So the pattern, whether it's a toxic pattern or good habits pattern, has certain patterns, right? You're a scientist, so you probably understand this
Yeah,
very
you
well,
explain
right?
to our audience, like explain to our audience,
Yeah.
and if I have to add anything, I will.
So, right, yes. So let's say one of the biggest challenges as a humanity is we have this um, we have a eating disorder as an population, humanity at this time. It's ingrained in us. You get upset. You consciously you know that you shouldn't be eating certain food, but subconsciously we're programmed. When this happens, which is trigger, we go and then get an ice cream because it's gonna comfort. It's gonna give me the release, right?
Yeah.
And then the pattern D is then I get hard on myself. Like I would be like I would resent, why did I do that? Right? So this is the pattern. But there is no time, even though consciously we know I shouldn't be going out to 7-Eleven and get a pint of an ice cream and eat all that to suit my nervous system that will get me resent of all this action. But how many times have I done this knowing that I don't want to do this consciously, but I do it? Because it's a program that is deeply embedded in us, not just with some of these actions, but it was programmed when we're in it, when we're a babies and a child. When we get upset, we either get the breast milk, which is made with that yumminess of the fat and the sugar, and or literally we're given a candies or cakes or cookies to soothe us. So it's subconsciously programmed within us. Like we don't like in this busy modern society, we don't give the children, hey, it's okay. Like there's nothing, like we don't talk it through or cuddle. immediate response is give some chocolate cookies with milk. It will calm them down. And a lot of us go for that as and then it's what it does is weight gain and diet industry. It's all kind of intertwined, all that.
And that
So
causes
I
a
mean,
lot of pain because, as you're
oh
saying, the
yeah.
deep pattern is you
Oh yeah.
looking back at yourself and your consciousness at that point after you've
Yeah.
done all of those compulsive
Yeah.
behaviors that you ultimately, as you're saying, there's no time. I love that you said that this is the first time someone puts it that way, that there is
Mhm.
no time. It happens
Yeah.
almost immediately because it's not something that you think about. It's a trigger. It triggers
Yeah.
a pattern that is already there. So there is no time. You're not thinking. There's no
Right. There's no
consciousness.
time. Yeah.
There's no
So
consciousness there.
yeah.
It's just in like automatic. It's like a button that leads
Oh
to the
yeah, exactly.
response.
It's
That's it.
automatic. Yeah. It's automatic
Um,
subconscious
yeah.
response.
Yes, and
Yeah.
how many times we watch others, and this is part of uh, the major problem of society today,
Hmm.
which is Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
Because what happens is that the deep pattern, it's
Hmm.
all together, all these pattern together causes a Stockholm syndrome. What is Stockholm syndrome? Because I mentioned it a lot of times that I never
Hmm.
explained it. So the Stockholm syndrome is something that has been actually named after a bank robber in Stockholm. So this guy was so charming and so physically attractive that he will get hostages in the banks for him to rob the banks, and the hostages will help him escape instead of feeling and so
Yeah.
they started began there's a beautiful series on Netflix called Clark, which is the name of this guy, and it's about this
Mm.
guy.
Yeah.
And it just, so basically, Stockholm syndrome is when people are irrationally attached to something that
Mhm.
is trying to hurt them or that is hurting them. And
Yeah.
so subconsciously, they protect that thing. They still
Yeah.
do that. They help it. And they don't realize even if they realize that it's hurting them, they still do that. Why does that
Yeah.
happen? And this happens every time there is an
Yeah.
association between pleasure and pain. So in this
Yeah.
case, the ice cream. So
Yeah.
because the ice cream gives you that momentaneous, like temporary feeling of
Yeah. Relief.
I feel
Yeah.
good and I feel
Yeah.
relieved, but
Yeah.
then you feel bad about it. But still,
Hmm.
then when you get the trigger, you have the trigger and there's no time, and then you keep doing it. So then you have Stockholm syndrome towards the ice cream, which
Right.
means that he hurts you, but you still keep doing it. And the same is with cities like New York. People are like, I love New York. It's a very hostile place, however. Like it's
Hmm.
very
Yeah.
difficult to live in these places.
Right.
Los Angeles, same thing, because there
Yeah.
is the sun, but the city is very hostile. Then people keep having Stockholm syndrome and keep wanting to be here, wanting to, even if it hurts. And so
Right.
we have the same pattern of Stockholm
Yeah.
syndrome all over the globe with a
Right.
lot of different things. This is the
Yeah.
real major problem of society today that we need to overcome.
Correct.
And plant medicine is like, I love that you are now working with Amanita Muscaria, which I had never heard of. I mean, I've heard of it because I'm from the south of Italy, where this mushroom actually grows everywhere. It's like
Yeah.
very, very predominant. And I
Okay.
go to harvest mushrooms as a kid. Like
Mhm.
we used to harvest mushrooms wild all the time, but you need to know what mushrooms you're harvesting, obviously. And so we don't work with medicinal mushrooms, or we don't actually do it for an herbalism or for a medicinal standpoint. We do that
Mhm.
just to eat them. And
Mhm.
so Amanita muscaria is like something that you must avoid at all costs because it's
Yeah.
something very poisonous, considered very poisonous, obviously, if you eat it. And so as a kid, that was like, so when you told me you're working with it, I was like, wait, what? Because this has been my main enemy since a kid, like,
Yeah.
because it's something that was considered poisonous at the time, but everything is poison. I work with Cambo now. I do
Mhm. Right. It's your
Cambo. If you
poison. Right.
if you Google it, is poisonous.
Right.
Everything, if you use it in microdoses, can have an effect, and if you use it in macrodoses, can have a different effect. So it's all about
Correct.
how you use everything. Same thing with the ice
Yeah.
cream. So
Yeah.
everything can be poisonous or
Oh,
can be
totally. Yeah. Right.
and I love
So,
that you mix it together with the epigenetics, or with the thing as kids they were programmed, which I
mhm.
think is an epigenetic standpoint they often talk about, because the fact that there is no time, as you're saying, that
Yeah.
means they were programmed. But like, what is this programming that we have. And it's both at the neurological level, in the sense that what you're talking about is a loop that is really like a real
Yeah.
neurological circuit that is mostly in our basal ganglia usually, which is the part of the brain where all of our habits are. And these things happen regardless of our consciousness. If you're completely unconscious, if you're like people who have brain injury, brain damage, keep being
Mhm.
able to use their basal ganglia and to use these habits. And there is a movie about that. I don't know if you've ever seen Memento. It's a movie about how this guy, like it's like there's a whole book on this as well. Basically, this guy, this is a real story. This guy has had brain damage, but
Mhm.
despite his brain damage, he will be able to go around his home. He was like he will not remember his name. He will not remember anything. But
Mhm.
then every day he used to, before the trauma, before the injury, he used to walk around his house as a form of exercise. And after the injury, he will keep being able to like to do that. He was still being able to do that, to go around his house and to come back home. And to the point that the insurance company was trying to use that against him, to say, you don't have any brain injuries, you're faking it. But thanks to the research on the basal ganglia, like people understood that these are completely different things, as you're saying. Like we can still have the compulsive habits and not be conscious about it, because those are two different parts of the brain. And
Mhm.
so most likely what Amanita Muscaria is doing is really making these patterns, is allowing you to build in the cortical brain. The conscious part of the brain is allowing you to become aware of those patterns that are otherwise ingrained.
Yes, in a way, you could explain it that way. It is a subconscious mushroom. It works with your subconscious state, in your dream state, and also multidimensionally. So you no longer become the victim of a time limit. Because what I noticed about what it does is that when I get upset, there's no 30 seconds. Entire act of 1 hour of the pre-process of I get triggered, I go either to the Cubbies or 7-Eleven or even if I go to Whole Foods to grab a pint of ice cream and come back home and eat them. It's a 1 hour of a process. It's not even a 5 second. But from this whole process, there is no way my higher self is coming in to stop it. It's not stopping. The only time it's stopping is after you finish that ice cream and feel good about 5 minutes, and then you start resenting of this action that I took, right? And then you kind of, you know what? I'm just never gonna do this again. And I start resenting myself, and I try not to. It never stopped for my entire adult life. It never stopped. I get
Did you stop
upset.
now?
I don't do that now. That's what I've been experiencing. I go to Whole Foods. I feel like shit because I talked to my ex and then he's being an asshole. And then I'm like, okay, I'm grabbing this. I'm grabbing several things and I'm gonna go eat. And then this is what I experience with microdosing this element. The time stops. When I am reaching my hands towards to the refrigerator for the ice cream, it stops and it's giving me the voice. It's like, hey, Yuri, I think we did talk about this from last moment. Do you want to continue to do this? And it's just showing me the whole movie of A to D. Do you really want to repeat this? Because I know that you really were trying to stop this behavior. And then that's only not even a 1 second when I'm doing this. It takes 1 second, right? Grabbing it. But the time paused for me to be conscious about, wait a second, what do I want to get upset? Wait a second, what is it gonna do? It's giving me the protocol of how this pattern works. I'm like, wait a second, I don't need this. So this was automatically happening to, I'm just giving you as a one example because this is
Yeah.
happening with my toxic relationship patterns with my boyfriends as well. It's like he calls, I get excited and I go see him with even knowing that he's not gonna show up the way my partner as a my partnership. And I would still put myself in that scene again with my ex-boyfriend. And then next day I'm like, shit, why did I do this? Right? It's the same thing is happening. I'm like, oh my God, I'm really better at getting out of these patterns that I swear that I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, I am no longer attracting narcissistic type of boyfriend just by doing some ceremonies with ayahuasca and mushroom. And I'm no longer. It took a long time though. I mean, I've been on it for 7, 8 years of medicine journey, diligently working on it. Um, but
But it's working.
it is
It's
work.
working.
Mhm.
I explain people, like I also host classes of to help people overcome
Okay.
compulsions, basically. And from a neurobiological standpoint, I always explain to people that really what happens is that we have the reptilian and the limbic brain, which are where the compulsions are, which is where, you know, you get triggered and then you get buy ice cream and then you eat it. That is in your compulsive brain. So the
Yeah,
compulsive brain is the part of the brain that it's most active in us because it's the part that we use all the time. While the
right.
cortical brain is the part where self-awareness is, where the awareness of these patterns is. But that part, because we are in a time of evolution in which we are becoming more conscious, we are evolving our cortex. So because of that, our cortex is still very fragile. It's still very, very sensitive to stress. And so the inner part of the brain, whenever it activates, and it becomes an inner source of stress, right? And so because the compulsions and the compulsive thinking, and we're always thinking, our mind is always active. Because of that, that turns off the cortex all the time. And so we're not conscious, we're unconscious,
Mhm.
we're constantly in
Right.
this, I have to strategize, I have to do, I have to do, I have to do. And so, well, this is really the compulsive unconscious brain thinking, not subconscious, but unconscious. And so, when you are unconscious, then your subconscious patterns, all the things that you've been programmed to do, don't get to the surface because your conscious mind is inactive, is not being working, is not working.
Right.
So one way that like I explain to people during my classes is to use the witness modality. What the witness modality does is the same thing that ultimately Amanita Muscaria, the ayahuasca, and
Mhm.
all of these modalities do. They allow your cortex to strengthen and to become self-aware of those patterns, of those things. Once you become aware, then you have basically built a trigger that is outside of the fight or flight mode, that is outside of your reptilian and limbic brain, that is outside of your basal ganglia, the triggers gets triggered every time your compulsions get triggered. And so basically now, if before it was, okay, I'm fearful, whatever, I feel threatened, or I feel like I'm in pain, I don't want to feel that pain, I want to find relief, I get the ice cream. I get the ice cream. Once you finally give to your reptilian limbic brain the food that he needed for it to feel released, then the source of stress diminishes and the cortex activates. And that's when you become self-aware of what you have done.
Mhm.
And you're like, what have I done? I've done it again. Where was I? Right? And so once you establish this trigger instead through
Mhm.
psychedelics or through different kinds of plant
Mhm.
medicine,
Mhm.
once you establish this trigger that allows your cortex to grow, then your cortex is strong enough of being present. You're often peaceful. You're often not
Right.
in your compulsive brain. Thanks to that, that allows your cortical brain to work all the time. And whenever you reach that triggers your compulsive part of the brain, your cortex is strong enough and active enough to be present, to be active in that moment, and to tell you, we talked about this. What are you doing? And so it
Yeah.
tells you that. And you're like, oh, you're right. But
Yeah.
that is literally a physiological part of our brain. So what most people don't understand is that there really It's not just about our soul, or there are a lot of things, even like the thing that I just said earlier about having a soul contract. You can have your function in the world, or your role, your mission in the world consciously, or you're going to be having it unconsciously. And so being conscious depends on the activation of certain parts of the brain, because you cannot possibly, it's like our brain, our body is like an antenna for
Hmm.
frequencies, right? And so the
Right.
frequency of consciousness is here all the time. But if your antenna is not there, you can't receive it. You can't receive that signal. And so having a properly functioning cortex that is well developed, that is strong, allows consciousness, the frequency of consciousness to be there for you. So you're conscious of the things you do all the time. And I love that you're using this mushroom to help you in your journey. I think most people do like use these plants or plant medicine in general. People that don't work with these things, they tend to just go and do that once, that one time they're
Yeah.
like, I've cleared my shadow, I cleared my trauma, that's it, I'm done, I'm enlightened. And that's not how it really works, in the sense that it's
Yeah.
like, and not everybody's meant to really have these kind of journeys that we're having, because we're healers. Most people are not healers. They don't need that. At the same time, there is, I think, people need to start doing these things more functionally to their journey. So
Hmm.
you find yourself in a certain situation, or you see that you're repeating a pattern, you see that, and so you're like, okay, what can I do to help myself go through it in a way that I help my consciousness, my brain to strengthen. I help my physiological body to be capable, to become capable of overcoming these things. And so I wanted to ask you also, in all of this, what your actual experience of ego death has been, because this is a recurring theme
Yeah.
in this new series for me. And so what kind of experience did you have, and how did it
Mhm.
go? What did you discover?
I mean, obviously, my ego death happened 18 years ago when I first got to meet this God presence. And I mean, that is the explanation of how your ego, who was very strongly present within yourself, now meeting your higher self wants to shine with together with your ego. So there's a big part of my ego sort of death happen with that process. I mean, it certainly doesn't mean our ego disappears completely, because we, as long as we live on this three-dimensional earth, we must have the ego, right? We just want to have healthy ego rather than toxic ego wants to just rule your life on earth. So, we want to have this balance of a higher self and ego sort of kind of working together to be the best version of yourself. And, if you are not really letting this balance keeping, then your ego will grow. And that's when I experienced my second ego death through the plant medicine, which my higher self raised up, and then my ego death happens again. And then to me, I don't think the ego death is something that happens just once in your lifetime. There is a very significant ego death that you can experience with very um, uh, potent plant medicine journey like ayahuasca or iboga. You may experience incredible ego death. Even as a breathwork facilitator, I've seen a lot of this ego death happens, throughout. Just, but it doesn't mean that ego disappears. It's just letting that part of your ego goes, like you're really releasing that part of this accumulated, toxic ego that was residing within you. And then it just feels incredible because it's giving you a new beginning of your next journey in this life. Ego would always want to come back and make a huge presence within your life. And this is where whenever you're doing something very uh, conscious ceremonial settings to re-meet your where your ego is. And I do believe that that's when you're re-experiencing ego, that's time to time through the significant moment.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. The ego death is not just one thing, it's like a path of really peeling off layers of ego. And I will really compare the ego and the highest self to our body and our spiritual self, in the sense that the body is needed for us to survive on the planet and to interact with each other and to go and talk to a podcast. And like you have to have like a certain kind of physical features for you to do certain things, but then the spiritual self is like the soul, or like the actual highest self is like those things are not necessary. This is just a tool. The ego is just a tool. So the most important part is really to understand that the ego is just a tool. And again, it comes down again to the physiology of our brain, the fact that it's made of layers, the innermost part,
Yeah.
and then this part around it, and then the part around it. And then ultimately what we want to do is we want to activate the cortex where our highest self is, so that we can embed the ego, which is in the amygdala, which is inside.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things is really reflected precisely by our neurobiology, where we really can tell that it's about embedding the ego into
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, as much as embedding these subconscious patterns into higher consciousness, so that if you want to get an ice cream, you can get an ice cream, but you're not
Correct.
going to do it unconsciously. You're not going to eat the whole pint of ice cream so that then you feel bad about yourself. You can still do the same thing. You can still eat the ice cream. You can still, but you don't need to do that when you get triggered. You can do it anytime, right?
Right.
You can do, and it also comes down to understanding. Once you understand these patterns, it's
Mm-hmm.
also much, much easier if you build this trigger that is outside of your amygdala, outside of your fight or flight mode, and is in your consciousness instead. Once you build this trigger, then you can make it become a trigger for healing, because then you don't actually need an ice cream when you're triggered in that way. What you need is to meditate, or is to do some chanting, or you need something that calms you down without giving you the side effect of having eaten a pint of ice cream. So what you
Right.
actually need is healing. The ice cream is
It's
not
the
gonna.
healing, right? It's the healing is what it wants to tell you because it otherwise trigger will continuously happen. So what you really want is to heal, and then that's what I treasure the awareness of being able to heal what is being presented. And then if you are healing that part of you, yes, the ice cream becomes something that you enjoy it because it's available, not as an addiction.
Absolutely.
Mm.
I agree. It's exactly how it is. And everything, can be an unconscious pattern, or it can be a conscious healed way of behaving, from relationships to eating disorders, like everything, like.
Right.
And that's really what it means to understanding, instead of identifying with your ego and identifying with your physical aspect, or identifying with your job. It really goes in layers, as much as these goes in layers, right? It's like we start our life in which we identify with our body, with our career, with how much money we have, with what we want to do in life, our goals. And when we date, we have all of these goals of, like, trying to find a partner that has all of these things that we want to do. And we ultimately realize that those things are not actually meaningful from a consciousness perspective, because we're simply repeating our patterns, right? In which
Yeah.
we haven't seen through the actual connection that we can have with people. And then the ice cream and all of these things are part of really repeating patterns that also have a lot to do with epigenetics, as I was saying.
Hmm.
And basically um every time we make choices that are really unsustainable for us, such as
Hmm.
eating the ice cream, or choosing, husbands or people who are really not ultimately good for us. Every time we choose that, we have to make epigenetic changes to adjust for all these choices we're making because they cause our body to have to suffer. So that's why
Mhm.
then we get to a point where we can't make any more
Yeah,
changes and our body
yeah,
is already messed up. And then we're like, I can't stay in this anymore. So this is a
right,
pattern and an arc that everybody goes through. We all go through. Everything in the universe is an arc. Everything that in the earth is an arc that moves away and changes, and then it becomes so heavy that it falls down again, right?
right.
And so, like these epigenetics changes that have to do with how the epigenetic of our brain works as well. You know, like every time we make these choices and we create these patterns, and then
Mhm.
we change the epigenetics of our brain cells. And what does that mean? That means that the epigenetic is what determines how the DNA is used. And so, a trigger at the macroscopic level, a trigger looks like I get triggered, and then I get an ice cream and I eat it. But
Mhm.
at the microscopic level is really a matter of how the DNA is used. And so when something happens, a certain protein attaches to the DNA and the DNA expresses a certain gene, and that gene produces another protein that causes at the macroscopic level us to do all of those things. And
Right,
so
right.
once we heal, healing ultimately comes down to healing our epigenetics.
Mhm.
Healing ultimately comes out. Maybe it will be interesting to see what Amanita Muscaria does to our epigenetics. Because
Yeah,
really what we need to do is to really cleanse. And that's why
yeah.
a lot of shamanic medicine have to do with
Yeah,
purging.
right, right,
We need to
exactly. So
cleanse.
yeah, well, so the Amanita muscaria actually was utilized for thousands of years prior. We were told that they were poisonous
Yeah.
in shamanic practice, and they were actually very the spirit of the Amanita is very cleansing and very much of peacefulness.
Mhm.
And its purpose is to really get rid of the fear. That's what I experiment with this specific mushroom. And Amanita muscaria also Amanita mushroom has anywhere from 600 different kind of different types of Amanita. And there
Hmm.
are a couple which are toxic and deadly that you don't want to eat them. Yeah, there are two of them. They are toxic. It's different name than, but Amanita muscaria is not actually non-deadly mushroom. So this is it's not scientific, but the reason why Amanita muscaria is labeled as toxic um, is because they were giving so much of a healing. It was all literally the shamans and priestess mushroom. And then what do? They give it to people, and then it's people heal, and then they were more in
Conscious?
love, conscious, more with in love, because the elements were sort of remove a lot of the fear out of the people. And then what happens when people are not having a lot of fear within them? Then for the controller, it becomes very difficult to control. You can't control people without fear.
Absolutely. That's how you get people to have triggers and to do compulsive
Right.
behaviors, to have compulsive
So, right.
behaviors.
So the Amanita mushroom is very imaginatory. Imagination equals to bringing a lot of creativity, which equals to love. And that's how people heal. So that's why the mushroom is in a lot of our folk stories and fairy tale stories, because it's boosting your imagination, which in my opinion is the key for healing. So this was given for us about maybe 700, 800 years ago. Like we need to stop. The controller's ideas. This is not very benefiting our agenda of controlling the humanity. So we don't want this out to the public, even through the shamanic practice. It wiped out of the books and studies and practices, other than very few that kept that practice to be continued, it was wiped out and then labeled as it's poisonous.
Wow, this is so interesting. I had no idea about that. I feel like in Italy we are very disconnected on purpose. I have my whole like vision of how the world works, and I want to publish a book on this because it's really like in Italy we are very disconnected from all of these practices, but I think it's intentional, and so everything
Yeah,
is food. Everything is food, and so for food eating purposes, that mushroom is not edible, right? But for medicinal purposes, that's a different thing. And so we
correct.
have completely also been kind of wiped away from all the witches, you know, all the healers in our history as well. And so now there are no healers in Italy. Like now
Mm.
they're coming up again. But like when
Yeah,
I grew up, the concept of healer was completely foreign. And I just
yeah.
like I come from a lineage of healers. Like my grandma and her dad were both people who would be healing others. Like my grandma had, as a 15-year-old, I think she saved people's life in very intuitive ways. Or her grandpa was like a guy that everybody will go to him in the small village, you know, to be healed. For, you know, whenever people had issues, they will go to him. And my grandpa also was a very wise man. People, doctors, he had like middle school degree, and people will come to him.
Mhm.
Doctors and physicians will come to him for advice. So I come from a very wise family, but nobody has even labeled them as healers in
Mm.
a sense, even though they
Right,
were. So we're
right.
completely being wiped away from this for
Yeah,
controlling reasons, as you're
yeah.
saying.
I mean, it's
And
the same thing that witches were burned.
oh yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
witches were burned because they were practicing medicine work with the plants and herbs and the
Yeah,
flowers.
absolutely,
And then
absolutely.
when it was all happening at the same time, witches needs to be burned. We need to get rid of natural medicine. The same time, what this is the same time when the Amanita got burned.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same
Yeah,
thing for everybody.
right.
And I talked during the previous episode, we talked about witch burning as well.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's very similar. And I had in one of my journeys, I had a vision of my, like, it was kind of like in between my spirit guide and my highest self and my past life. And it was a witch. So I think
Mhm.
I've been burned most likely in history, you know, like, because I am this person who speaks the truth as you are, you
Right.
know, like, and so when you speak the truth in a world that is unconscious and doesn't want for people to speak the truth because this
Mhm.
bubble has to be kept going,
Yeah.
then obviously people who speak the truth are oppressed and suppressed. And unfortunately, until the population starts reaching a certain threshold of awakening, they're not going to understand that the reason why most of us get
Mhm.
persecuted and burned, you know, is
Yeah.
because we are trying to save them. And instead,
Exactly.
they don't
Right.
realize that. And so people tend to actually allow the system itself to oppress those who try to save the population. So this is just a matter of physics. We're going towards that. We're like, it's just a matter of time. I would like for you to talk more about mushrooms, though, in the sense that I feel
Yeah.
like you have an experience that I would like to give specifically on
Yeah.
mushrooms. So, do you think so now
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
mushrooms are not like plants, are literally another kingdom. Like there is the kingdom
Correct.
of plants, the kingdom of like
Mushroom. Yeah.
animals, and the kingdom of mushrooms. And
Correct.
so they're completely different. They don't grow like plants. They don't use the sun to grow. What they do is they're decomposers. So what they do is they use decomposed matter, which includes cadavers or like cadavers of plants or animals. So what they do, they're in between. They basically use matter that is being decomposed and they turned it into a fruit body, which is the mushroom that we
Right.
eat and that we use for ceremonial purposes.
Yeah.
So do you think, so what is your thought about this? Do you think mushrooms are like portals because of that, portals between these two worlds because they are
Yeah.
at the edge?
They're the connector. They're the connectors.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so because how, right, they're not necessarily associated as a plants or trees or animals, but they are directly connected to the trees, plants, and the animal kingdoms.
Yeah,
They are underneath our soil, our earth. They are the one who's connecting the trees in between and signal all of what we have going on the earth to reconnect. What they're teaching us is that we have gone so far from how we used to be as an connective a relation being to separate beings. And that's why they are, okay, like the human beings need some of our help. So they have made their comeback, including Amanita, and they're teaching us how to reconnect with who and what we are. We're not supposed to be living as an complete independent, like I don't need anybody. Like, if I'm good, then good. Like we are not supposed to be just, be living alone and don't need anyone. So we need a village. That's the concept. So
Yes.
it's kind of like, yeah, I like to exemplify the Smurfs because it actually does represent
Oh, I love it.
the Amanita. What we need is a healthy village concept of what you see from the Smurf village, right? Where each individual soul and being has its gift that is unique to each one of them will contribute for the health of the village. Because that, dark forces were always, as long as we live on the earth, wants to come and destroy. And then the Smurfs doesn't have a lot of strength or the strength
Muscles.
yeah, but they do it with lovely ideas. They create this like lovely way of winning the cases with love, right? They do it together in very silly, funny way by just being just themselves. Like it's just it doesn't need rocket science for us to win. Because what's happening is all this this new guns and more powerful um things to kill each other is never gonna end,
Yeah.
right? We all know that, but it's like bigger, the more powerful, faster, all these things to kill others. And it's not how, we can evolve. It's, yeah, technology will evolve. This is what we experienced from the fall of Atlantis as well. We had all this available, what we have available from the time of Atlantis. And we failed because we went with more power, the top of patriarchy way. It will just never end, but we destroy ourselves. So we are aware of that, and that's the reason why a lot of the light beings are now emerging out of how do we actually get out of this traumatized earth. And we all know that it's love, but what does it really mean is to really understand what fear means and what is each one of us have in relation with love and the fear. We obviously we are imbalanced in this state.
Yeah.
So the mushroom, in my opinion, is here to teach us by opening all the chakras. So when you're looking at the mushroom, it represents, it's funny that you're wearing the red and white right there with your hair all.
And I didn't think of it.
So the mushroom has the red and white is the very distinctive color, which represent red and white. The crown chakra representing white, the the red representing the root, the red representing the earth, the body, the physical body, the white representing the crown, the spirit world. So in my opinion, this has the way to open all this chakra. So when you're opening these chakras of your body, you have more awareness and your conscious mind and your subconscious mind is able to merge,
Yes.
right?
Yes. And you know what? I love all the things you said, and especially you gave me this beautiful download of really humanity as our brain, as our subconscious, all the things that we have said so far, of having to embed our ego and our fear into our consciousness so that we can use them as a tool instead of being trapped into them and identifying with our ego is the same thing that humanity has to do. Humanity also is like our brain. And first of all, what humanity does, like the result of what we obtain with the civilization, depends on how much the ego side and the limbic side and the conscious side are developed. So who are these sides in our humanity? In our humanity, the healers are the conscious side of humanity, the spiritual teachers. So right now through history, most of the healers are being killed. And so they were very weak as much as our cortex was weak. And so once the body understands that it has to give support to the cortex, support to the healers, that it has to go to the healers, because the healers represent those that allow humanity to heal from the subconscious mind, to heal from the subconscious patterns, to heal from fear, and to become aware, then the consciousness of humanity will rise, because people as a collective are going to have a better consciousness, a better cortical brain. And because of that, the whole humanity will have embedded the ego and the really like our fight or flight modality into consciousness. And we're going to make it become as part of living on this planet, not as the necessity that we have to survive. Is a completely different way of existing. And I think you're right that mushrooms are really connected, and so they really connect all the roots and everything. So if we see the world like the earth as this, you know, layers of layers. You get to the surface and there are all these roots that are connected, and they create this village of connection where everything works together, the plants and everything works together. And then from there, we have what emerges in the surface, which are the fruit bodies, the trees that are already kind of separate, but they look separate to us, but they're really not. Like under the surface, everything is connected. And so
Correct.
even if and so then there are animals which are not only separate, but they are literally separate with their legs. And so they can even go around, and we are part of the animal kingdom. And so by going around, and we are even more convinced of being separate from the earth, to the point that most people consider themselves as inhabitant of the earth, not like the earth. We are the earth. We come from the earth and we go back to the earth. We are earth that is going around itself, is walking around. Well, we don't realize that we feel so separate that people believe that even that the life is being seated on our planet. Maybe it's part of it, but from where did it come from? From our planet, even if it did, we are the planet. We are
Correct.
some planet. We are pieces of a planet that detach from itself and go roam around for a while and go back. And so we don't see, as much as with the trees and the mushrooms, we don't see all the mycelium, all the roots, all the things that are connected with each other, right? We don't see that we are connected at the soul level, at the spiritual level. We don't see all the connections at the energetic level that we have with people around us, all the soul contracts, all this network of
Mhm.
roots and connections that they're so complex. We don't see that network, but we are part of that network. And so it's really important to remember that, and to remember that we affect every part of the network as much as we have a role in that network. And then I love that you brought up the controlling side of it, because we are obviously, our planet is obviously right now at a stage in which it needs to evolve, right? And so it doesn't see all these connections. It can't possibly be conscious, and so it keeps being compulsive. So we don't know about all of these A, B, C, D connections as much as we don't know subconsciously about our own mind. We don't know in people. We don't know that, you're meant to meet someone, that you're meant to tell that to them, and that you're meant to then go to someone else and for them to be triggered by you, for them to do something. We don't know that we are meant to do all of these things, because that's how the universe works. That's how the earth works. But that's exactly how it is. And the problem is that and there are physical reasons for this, but also we are being controlled for us to keep being oppressed, to keep staying down in our
Right.
subconscious mind, and to
Right.
keep being these cows in the farm. Because if you in nature, every animal evolves at some point, and only cows in a farm stay always the same. Only animals in a farm stay always the same. Why? Because in a farm, cows that are different, they're lesser meaty, they're lesser juicy, they're lesser good, they're lesser docile, emerge all the time. And what do when a cow that is not docile emerges in a farm? They kill it. They kill
Mm,
it because it can't have kids. It can't have pups, because if you don't allow that cow to have pups, then you're not gonna have calves, right? You're not gonna have any more of those cows in your farm, and so you can keep the cow docile. And in our society, patriarchy is doing that as well. Like patriarchy for in history and today, especially in the United States and in Italy, women were strong, tend to
mm,
not being allowed to have kids on purpose, so that the society doesn't have those kids. Society doesn't have, and so that is causing a huge issue in terms of evolution of our humanity, because
mm.
humanity is being pushed to stay at the same exact stage of unconsciousness all the
Yeah,
time. And this is done in so many ways. It's done by preventing us from using medicinal mushrooms or plant
right,
medicine, from
right,
being able, that would allow us instead to reach that higher level of consciousness, is to pass on that consciousness to our kids, and to pass
right.
on the conscious, and to heal the generational trauma. And instead, trauma is constantly given to us, like what is happening now in Gaza and Ukraine. These are, sounds crazy, but these things are being done on purpose to keep people in their fight or flight mode. If something
Exactly,
happens
right.
elsewhere, you're
Yeah.
constantly, it can happen to me, right? It's crazy that millions of people are being killed just to keep the entire population
In
unconscious.
here, right,
Yeah,
right.
it's
Yeah,
crazy to think
right.
about that. But this is how those who control us really function, and really, like, we're just their cows. And so obviously you want to keep your cows oppressed. And so it's important for the population right now to really, and it's going to happen because, again, this is a physical thing. These people that control us, they're part of how the universe works. They're just the
Correct,
crust
right,
of the universe itself that is expanding, and they're just a thick layer of crust of this expansion of the universe that is
right.
strong and is pushing us down. But we're
Yeah,
going to
because
break it.
yeah, right. Because if we don't have that pressure, we are too comfortable to grow, right?
Yeah,
We're not meant to live just a happily ever Cinderella life here
yeah,
on Earth because we'll be bored. That's not what the soul wants. The soul wants always growth and expansion, and then those whether you call it dark energies or the patriarchy energies, controlling energies, it's
yeah,
actually simultaneously working with us. And people want to just, label it as a bad devil. But we need that as a part of evolution. And it's interesting that your podcast is New Earth podcast. I'm also involved with the New Earth events that I continuously participate. We are emerging in the process of evolution as a human consciousness to complete new earth way of being on the earth. That's what I have in been feeling throughout my evolution. And we lived as whatever that we were, okay and allowed to live so far. And obviously, this is a time when we are making this decision as like, okay, right, something we want to evolve, right? And that's a part of the new earth evolution. And that doesn't just mean that everything is going to, oh, new earth, so we just have it. And then there is going to be a part where it could be very intense of a separation of new earth birthing and old earth dying, which is part of the ego death that in a bigger scale is what is happening. As if we want to create new earth, there has to be something that needs to decompose, which is the old way of how the earth is operating.
yeah,
So this is another reason why a lot of this lesson being presented to us, I feel like, oh, I just did a big lesson, but boom, another lesson coming up strongly right now at this time. 2025 is gonna be all about that moving forward. Um, but this is what I feel like happening. Death of old and new beginning. And things like what you do, what I do, the mushrooms, plant medicine are part of creating this new earth to become materialized.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. And I think it's beautiful that this is happening through the mushrooms because I think, you know, we're really, for us to strengthen this consciousness of the earth, we need to connect the dots, right? To connect as much as all the, what is ultimately down to the egoic society that we have are fraternities, right? Fraternities represent very strong networks, right? So the problem of the healers, that is our cortex, is that right now we have a lot of dots, but we don't
Mhm.
have a lot of connections between all of these dots. Once we
Right.
are gonna reach that connection, we're going to be actually stepping into the next phase, which is the phase in which consciousness of the planet is going to rise. And I'm actually trying to do that because I want to start conscious healthcare, I called it. And if you want to participate, let me know. It's very like
Oh,
something about connecting all the healers with the population so that we connect all of these dots.
yeah.
And it's really what we need to do right now is the next
Mhm.
phase to create the same connections that our egoic society, the ego of humanity, has created for thousands of years, to finally connect the dots in the
Mhm.
conscious side of the humanity, which is the healers, the spiritual leaders. So those need to be connected instead of being only dots, that everybody's working on their own and doing their own thing. We need to start connecting all of that. That will become the point in
Mm.
which consciousness will truly rise to the next level in which it's supposed to be. So hopefully we can do that soon, and the population is
Yeah.
going to understand, because it's all about, even the bacteria have a mechanism that is called quorum sensing. They can only become pathogenic, and so cause infections if they are enough, if they are big, like numerous enough. And so they
Right.
check how many they are, and if they're enough, then they cause the infection. So right now the population is still kind of like figuring it out. I feel like
Right.
we are gonna have to reach a threshold in which, we're gonna have to do this quorum sensing to check how many people are actually conscious and are actually capable. Once we
Mhm.
do that, then we can actually build finally the next level of society, the next level of humanity, in which we go towards peace. We go towards consciousness. We stop having all of these conflicts all over the place.
Mhm. Correct. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes, this is beautiful. I would love for you to have some time to just give your links, and all of your links are gonna go
Yeah.
also in the description of the episode. But like, if you have any upcoming events or any ceremony that you're gonna be leading soon, or if you want to give any information about what your
Absolutely. Yeah.
products, your services, or anything.
Yes. So my website is called healwithuri.com about my sessions and ceremonies. I have another website called amanitaangels.com, which shows all the products that I developed, and also you could become a part of the team as an affiliate and work with me and being a part of the angels of Amanita. Um, I have all the presence on Instagram and TikTok as an Heal with Yuri, YouTubes and all that. And I don't have a big presence, but I have some presence on that. I do full moon ceremony, new moon ceremony monthly in person at Mystic Journey Bookstore in Santa Monica, and also facilitate online ceremonies and also private ceremonies. And I'm usually on the weekends doing event expos, fairs, and go and lecture and do workshops and so on. You could reach me at through herewithyuri.com if you have any specific questions and want to work with me privately or work with your community. I do all of that. So that's about it. I have a book coming up actually again called The Healing with Amanita Muscaria, and I plan to do some book tour in the beginning of the 2025. So it will be available both online and in person, just the soft copies. So if you're interested, just check it out. It should be available in my website as well.
Amazing. I'm actually excited. I can't wait for your book to come out.
Yeah.
And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I really, really enjoyed having Uri here. And I think this was such a needed topic to talk more about mushrooms and all kinds of different plant medicine that people use. And the conscious, I feel like this episode turned out a lot different than what I expected in a sense, but a lot better also. Like it was really incredible. And we talked about so many incredible things about the consciousness of humanity. I think this was really great. And I really thank you for your wisdom and for bringing your story to our podcast. And you guys can find me as usual at 360holisticcoach.com or on Instagram at 360holistic.coach. And please reach out, let us know what you think. Reach out to her, reach out to me, let us know if you have any comment or anything you would like to for us to talk about also on this podcast. And thank you so much, Uri, and I wish you all a great day.
Yes, you too. Have a blessing holidays.
Yes. Bye-bye.